The Daily Code Snippet, an introduction to web typography. We will begin by learning the basics of text styling with CSS, setting the font, setting the size, weight, style, and color, line and letter spacing, text alignment, text transformation, and decorations, and finally a shorthand. The font family properties used to set the font or a list of fonts, also known as the font stack for an element. The browser can only apply a font if it is available on the machine on which the website is being accessed. If it is not available, the browser will load a default font. These are examples for paragraph text. P. Font family, Georgia. P. Font family, Georgia, comma, serif. The first states that all paragraph text should be set in Georgia. The second states that all paragraph text should be set in Georgia, but if it is unavailable, then the browser should pick unavailable serif font. CSS recognizes 5 categories for fonts: serif, sans-serif, monospace, cursive, and fantasy. As a review, serif fonts have flourishes and other details at the end of strokes. Sans-serif fonts do not have serifs. In a monospace font, each character has the same width. Monospace fonts are typically used to display code. Cursive fonts are meant to look like handwriting. The strokes are connected and flow together. Fantasy fonts are considered decorative and would be similar to a display font. The default fonts that are pulled for each category depend on the browser and operating system of the computer. While serif, sans-serif, and monospace are likely to pull a reasonable replacement, the result for cursive and fantasy can be a surprise. Web-safe fonts are those that are considered available on many different operating systems, such as Windows, MacOS, Linux, Android, and iOS. As a result, they can be used without much concern that they would not be available. Times New Roman, serif. Georgia, serif. Arial, sans-serif. Trebuchet MS, sans-serif. Verdana, sans-serif. Courier, monospace. Consolas, monospace. More Windows than Mac. Brush Script MT, cursive. More on Mac than Windows. Papyrus, fantasy. More on Mac than Windows. In our example, we could not pull up Consolas, so it is actually displayed in Courier because I am working on a Mac computer. The website cssfontstack.com is useful to find out the availability of web-safe fonts on various operating systems. To use a list of fonts for the font family property because it gives the browser other options if the chosen font is unavailable. This is called a font stack. The font options are separated by commas. The browser will go from left to right and see if each is available and choose the first font available to display, so the order is important in your list. Usually it is best to add one of the 5 categories recognized by the browser at the end of the statement: serif, sans-serif, monospace, cursive, and fantasy. This allows the browser to choose an available font on the system that is similar to what you desire. Paragraph text, font family, Georgia, Times New Roman, in quotation marks, serif. In this example, paragraph text will be displayed in Georgia. If that is unavailable, the text will display in Times New Roman. And finally, if that is not available, it will choose any serif font on the system. We should make note that the reason the font Times New Roman appears in quotes is because any font name with more than one word needs to be written out within quotes. Here is another example. Paragraph text, font family, Arial, Helvetica, Verdana, Trebuchet MS, in quotation marks, sans-serif. We learned there are several fonts called web-safe fonts that commonly exist on systems. Since you are not distributing a typeface, there is no licensing issue using a method where the user has the typeface installed. However, this method limits the choice of fonts you can use. What do you do if you want to load a particular font? In this case, there are different methods that have been used over the years to deliver the fonts with your files so that a website will display true to your design. We will only briefly touch on 3 older methods for web typography because they are no longer recommended. 1. Image replacement. 2. Cipher. And 3. QFont. With image replacement, you create a graphic that contains the text as you want it to appear. The advantage is that you have a wide range of choices of fonts because you can use any typeface as long as you have a license to use it on your computer to produce the graphic. The main disadvantage is that you are not using live text. This means any text content in an image is not available to those using screen readers unless alternative text is included, and it is not available to search engines as well. An image-based method may be difficult to scale properly in a responsive design. Cipher or Scalable Inman Flash Replacement replaced the text elements with Adobe Flash equivalents using JavaScript. While it improved on image replacement because the text was selectable and it was accessible, it required a lot of bandwidth and only worked if the user had Adobe Flash and JavaScript enabled. Of course, these days Adobe Flash is no longer in use. QFont also used JavaScript but created an SVG or VML version of the text. While Cipher was supported by type foundries at the time, QFont was less supported, so this means that without licensing, you could not legally use it for many fonts. Now we use a couple of ways to deliver fonts to our users for our websites. One is @FontFace, and the other is using service-based font face, with the latter becoming more popular. With @FontFace, the CSS specifies where a font can be downloaded if it is not installed. The license to use the font must permit distribution via @FontFace, and the act of downloading can slow the loading of your web page. With service-based font face, you are either choosing a free or paid service to deliver the fonts. The choices are wider than traditional @FontFace, and the service takes care of the licensing. As long as you are paying the fees to the type foundries, you are covered. We will discuss these methods next week. Presented by Designers Learn Code.